Welcome to Episode 4 of Mad Time Podcast. I'm joined as always by Zach, Brad, and Brock. We're here to break down UFC 241. The breakdown, we have Daniel Cormier and Stipe Miocic, a rematch of their fight last year. My personal opinion, I think this should have been International Fight Week again this year as opposed to having John Jones versus Thiago Santos. I feel like that was very underwhelming, but here we are with a very good card. We have Daniel Cormier and Stipe Miocic, like I said, and then the co-main event, we have Nate Diaz versus Anthony Pettis. We have Romero versus Paulo Costa. And Gabriel Benitez versus Sadiq Youssef. And Derek Brunson versus Enid Heitch. We're going to start with the main event and work our way down. Zach, what do you think about DC versus Stipe again?
Oh, well, I mean, this is the big card that we've been waiting for a little while now. We had all that nonsense about Brock Lesnar potentially fighting DC, which I don't think anybody really believed it was going to happen. It seemed kind of like could Brock Lesnar pass USADA testing? I don't think that's going to happen.
It became a circus act,
Exactly.
I felt like there was a time in there where there was a possibility that they didn't re-up the USADA contract.
Yeah.
But then they did re-up it.
And they could, have this little window where we have, a no testing card?
They might have just gotten rid of
They've
USADA.
done this before.
They've thought about getting rid of USADA testing completely again.
But with Brock Lesnar, they've done this before, where they give him exceptions they don't give anybody else. Remember with UFC 200 a couple years ago, he was given a 4-month grace period, because you're supposed to be tested 4 months before you come.
6 months.
6 months, yes. But he was given a complete waiver, and then you saw what happened with that shit show. But I'm glad that fight didn't happen. I want to see DC just continue fighting actual contenders, not
kind of want to watch
fighting
DC
money fights.
beat that
not
ass,
a gimmick.
Personally.
Yeah, but not a gimmick fight. Go back to defending the belt. Him versus Stipe is the fight to make. Zach, how do you feel that this fight's going to go this time?
We were talking about this earlier, and it seems like a lot of people are on DC, and I can see why. It's kind of going against what I've said in the past, and that DC's the second best fighter in the world.
Yeah.
I think he is. But I feel like this time around, Stipe might get him. If Stipe can just keep it long with the jab, then I think that he can give DC some problems. It wasn't until they got into the clinch and he got clipped with that right hand that things went sideways for him. Up until that point he was doing okay. But Daniel Cormier is a monster. They're so close in skill level. It's a really tough fight to pick.
Let me ask you something. If it became a straight wrestling match between these two, how do you think it would go, long term, a 5-round wrestling match? Obviously, DC has phenomenal wrestling, we know that. But when it comes to wrestling a big-ass heavyweight like Stipe, who does know how to wrestle, how does that go?
DC's obviously the better wrestler on paper, and, his accolades in wrestling are better than Stipe's, but this isn't a wrestling match, it's an MMA fight. And I think, like you said, Stipe's wrestling is good enough that in an MMA fight, along with his boxing, because he's probably not going to throw a lot of kicks against DC, I really think the way he wins this fight is with a jab.
Yeah.
If he's got to keep that jab in DC's face and keep circling and avoid the clinch, and I think he can win that way.
So I'm picking up that you think that Stipe is going to win this fight. Do you think he finishes him? Or?
No, I think I got Stipe by decision.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's the way he does it.
Close decision?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I definitely think Daniel will probably, win at least 2 rounds.
Right.
It could even be a split decision if it goes that way.
Right.
I mean, Stipe hits hard, don't get me wrong. And it's going to really depend on can that power translate into the later rounds. We've seen Stipe sleep some guys before, but I don't think it's very often in the later rounds.
Yeah.
It's usually in rounds 1 and 2.
I was arguing that I do think Stipe hits hard, but I feel like he is a volume guy, and that's what's gotten him this far. Because one of the only knockouts, straight knockouts that I've seen him have is with Fabricio Verdum, and Verdum was running right at him.
Yeah,
and that kind of helped the
he
power.
He hit him with that double right hand.
He does have a couple other knockouts besides that.
Dos Santos early. Yeah.
He was on a run there for a little bit, but then earlier knockouts in his career as well.
Mm-hmm.
But those are the ones that stand out for sure.
So yeah, that's.
Didn't he put down Overeem as well?
Yes,
he did put down Overeem.
So
remember, Stipe tapped. So
That's the thing. Everybody puts that over him, so how much does that mean? But I do think it was an impressive win.
Yeah, over him at that time. I really would have liked to see Stipe fight somebody between DC and now. Just because, I don't know, I feel like I would have a better feel of where he's at now. I don't know where he's at after that DC knockout.
It might have been better for him to take a fight. It might have helped his cause to beat DC.
It might have helped his cause to get this fight sooner.
Yeah.
It might have helped his cause to be more prepared for DC. Might have got him hit in the head a bunch more times. It might be good that he took a break. I'm one to say that sometimes fighters need to take a little time off.
Especially after getting knocked out.
Yeah, especially after a knockout. So I don't mind it, but I've said too many times that there's one man on this planet ever that could beat Daniel Cormier in a fist fight in a cage, and it's not Stipe Miocic. So
I wonder who it is. But yeah, how do you see it going with the 5-round rematch?
I think it's gonna be. I think I see almost the same but opposite fight that Zach was talking about.
You think it ends quickly?
No, same fight. So it's still a 5-round decision, and it's probably
in favor of DC.
I could see Stipe stealing 2 rounds.
Yeah,
maybe with that jab, but who hasn't DC been able to get underneath and inside?
Mm-hmm.
Who's done that?
The thing with this first fight, it's confusing because DC found a glaring hole in Stipe's game and put him away very quickly. So we don't have much tape study as far as how this rematch is going to go. Obviously, I think that hole is probably fixed by now from Stipe. He's not going to be lazy in the clinch. He's not going to be going for lazy wrist control, lazy underhooks. But we don't know how this fight's going to go. It's basically like they're fighting for the first time. Except that there has to be that mental barrier in some ways that he knows this guy knocked him out before.
And Stipe's the kind of guy, he's got that immigrant mentality. And
Stiopich.
Yeah, Stiopich has got that immigrant mentality, and but he does have that, he's got that Midwest mentality, if you want to be honest with it. He's got I come and go to work every fucking day.
Blue collar, yeah.
Yeah. So, I lean towards DC. I think DC knows that he has to put on some sort of dominant fight here.
Mm-hmm.
Because the only way you can answer, unless he somehow gets the knockout early again, is, in my mind, the only other way you show that you're truly better than this guy. You win, but you come out looking good if you can put on a 5-round, you just dominate and control this guy. And DC's perfectly capable of putting on a 5-round fight like that.
Yeah.
And
so ultimately your prediction is DC in a 5-round decision?
Yeah, I see DC probably 3-2 or 4-1.
Yeah. Brock, what do you think?
I fully agree with Zach. I believe that from a distance, Stipe can outbox DC. He was outstriking him. He landed a few really good uppercuts on the cage. He just had very good control of the fight until DC was able to work his way in, and him being so much of a smaller guy, it really puts him at a disadvantage with Stipe's ability to box. And if you go back, and I know it's only 1 round, so it's hard to judge this next fight off of really a round and a half. But if you look into that first round, Stipe was definitely a lot stronger than him.
Yeah.
And I won't say he out-wrestled him, but he was wrestling better offensively than DC was able to defensively at that time.
Yeah.
He was holding him against the cage. He was able to, I believe he lifted him off his feet a couple times, and he was controlling him against the cage and landing strikes. And
he's bigger
that's not
and longer.
a thing. That's not a thing that happens to DC, but he's bigger and longer and stronger. Therefore, it's a real problem if they do get in the clinch. He's able to stay away from those tight hooks and uppercuts from DC, and he can close the distance because I believe he possibly could out-wrestle DC strictly because of size and strength.
Yeah, and the fact is we've seen him go 5 rounds multiple times.
Exactly.
He is a volume cardio heavyweight, and that's how you win heavyweight fights. And yes, you can knock people out, but it pays in the long run to be one of those guys like a Cain Velasquez or a Stipe Miocic.
Exactly,
and
that's why I believe.
Yeah, of course.
I believe that he will take. I don't think he's going to TKO him or anything, or he's definitely not going to submit him, in my opinion. But I think he's going to get a decision. It's going to be a close one, but I think he'll get the decision by outboxing, staying on the outside and outboxing, using his jab a lot. And also, if he needs to, he's going to wrestle him on the cage just to get control time and things like that. He's going to make it. He's going to try to dominate as much as he can, putting pressure on DC, and that's how he's going to win that fight.
So you think he takes a fairly one-sided 5-round decision? You think so?
I believe so. I feel like he'll take the. I feel like he might take the last 3. I feel like DC might be in his head a little bit, or DC might come out with a certain confidence, and bring a volume that may or may not be able to be kept. But I think I think Stipe is going to catch his groove, maybe even in the second. Yeah. But I think he is going to get 3, whether it's the second, and then the 4th and 5th, or 3rd, 4th, and 5th. But I think he is going to catch those later rounds, and one of the first 2.
Yeah. The thing with both of these guys is obviously the wrestling game is very impressive, and you've seen them wear on guys over 5 rounds, but we've never really seen either of them get... Never have they been the nail in a wrestling match except for maybe DC's first fight with John Jones.
Correct.
So that's really the big if for this fight for me, because I don't think it's going to end like the first fight at all, where I think Stipe probably fixed that hole in his game,
for sure.
And we're in for a much longer fight this time. So how does Stipe react if he starts getting out-wrestled a little bit? Is he going to wilt like we haven't seen before, or is it vice versa? Is DC going to wilt a little bit?
I think Stipe is really deceptively strong.
Yeah,
I agree, because the way he held DC down...
The way he held on to Francis Ngannou.
Yeah, that as well.
You know what I mean?
You don't do that. That's not a thing you do.
Like, that guy was made in a laboratory somewhere.
Yeah.
I mean, it's crazy. He's like built like a superhero. And Stipe held on to that motherfucker for 5 rounds.
Yeah.
And avoided all the death that guy can throw at you.
He outstruck him and most definitely out-wrestled him.
So, can DC get Stipe down? Sure. Can he hold him down and do damage? That's another question. That's a whole other
a much bigger
question.
guy that will stay there a while as far as conditioning goes. So the main X factor that makes me pick Daniel Cormier for this fight, and definitely not betting. I believe DC's probably at like minus 160 right now. Definitely not a fight to bet on for me, but I would say the one X factor that's making me pick Daniel Cormier is the power that we saw in the first fight. I think he hits extremely hard at heavyweight.
He does.
And I'm not saying he's going to, catch a wide open hook like he did last time, but I do feel like he's going to lay down on one of these punches and possibly catch Stipe in either the second or third round. That's my ultimate prediction for that fight. I think it's going to be a great fight regardless, but
Definitely.
Moving on to the co-main event.
As of right now, we got Daniel coming in at a minus 145.
Okay.
And Stipe coming in at plus 115.
See, either way, it's not a terrible bet, but if you are a betting man, you got to realize that's a really close fight, and it's going to be a good one.
Generally, in really, really close fights, I take the money.
Yeah.
So whoever the underdog is and getting money, that's who I usually go with.
And especially if it gets more lopsided, I'll probably throw a couple bucks on Stipe.
What do you think about how Daniel's kickboxing will look against Stipe? Because Daniel is a wrestler for sure, and he does use his wrestling and his dirty boxing. But do you think he'll be able to get underneath and inside of Stipe at all? Do you think that's any sort of factor here?
Based off the first fight, I don't want to call it a lucky shot.
Mm-hmm.
But Stipe was definitely slacking and felt like maybe he wasn't in danger. He did get a little lazy with the left hand wrist control. But I don't think that really reflects on his game like people are saying it does.
Mm-hmm.
It's definitely something that he's going to have to be aware of. But when it comes down to it, like, Stipe is... They both hurt each other. Maybe they didn't like stun each other and had each other wobbling, but at some point in that first round, they both landed clean shots on each other that woke them both up. You know what I mean? They were both aware of each other's power within the first few minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Stipe, he'll throw some leg kicks, but that's really all you're going to get from him. But it's just watching what I watched for those first few minutes. He was able to control him by just keeping distance because DC is so much shorter.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
His reach isn't there, and Stipe was able to just pressure him and control him on the cage and just keep him. He just kept him backpedaling because he had such a long jab.
And I agree.
I believe he's a Golden Gloves boxing champion as well.
Probably.
It showed in that fight. I'll say that because DC definitely has very, very good striking, and it showed it. It made Stipe look very good that he was able to outstrike a guy like that.
Mm-hmm. And with only a round to look at,
Right,
it's
it's
really
difficult.
hard to know. And that's why I can see the rounds going really both ways, with Stipe using the jab to circle and back up DC, and DC working his way inside and getting his dirty boxing and takedowns and stuff, and Stipe being able to work out of takedowns. So I see a close, just knockdown, drag-out fight, honestly. And I don't know. I just always lean towards DC. It's kind of hard not to.
I think he's going to have a very, very difficult time if he tries to take Stipe down in the middle of the cage. Even against the cage, it's going to be very tough because he's so much bigger. He's so strong, and if he even has one of his underhooks, overhook, underhook, he's just going to pry up on DC and pull him up. You know, it's going to be very hard for him to get under him, pick a leg, or because I mean, look at how many guys DC just picks up and ragdolls. Even guys at heavyweight, he's done it before. He picks him up over his head and drops him. You know,
does just about everybody he fights.
But DC's just Stipe, he's built different. He's got like a certain strength to him that maybe I don't want to say DC hasn't felt, because he's wrestled a million different people, but it's not a very common thing that he has to deal with. So it makes it very difficult for him to be able to shoot on him. That's why his clinch is going to control that fight. His dirty boxing in the clinch.
Yeah, and I think ultimately we could all be right about what we think this fight's going to be, and it's so between the four of us we're split. So, and we're all talking. I feel like at least we all pretty much agree the fight's going to be a similar way.
Yeah,
it's just a matter who takes 3 rounds as opposed to the other.
Definitely, I see it. I could see it either way. I just believe Stipe might be able to put it together better this time.
So, moving on to a fight that maybe some people are looking forward to a little more. I think it's a close competitive race as far as that's concerned. Co-main event, Nate Diaz returning to fight Anthony Showtime Pettis. I feel like this is like a lot of Nate Diaz fights, and maybe his brother Nick, where sometimes they just get a fight that doesn't make sense as far as title contention. It's just two guys that want to fight, they want to throw down, and I'm looking forward to this fight. And I honestly, I'll probably come up with a prediction after we're done discussing this, but right now it's just so hard to pick this fight. I see it going many other ways. Brock, how do you see this fight going?
You know, I'm gonna do the unpopular opinion here. I'm gonna take Anthony Pettis. Based off what I've seen from him, even in his loss against Tony Ferguson, you have to agree that that's one of the best performances he's put on in years. And if it reflects anything on how he's going to act in this fight, I think he's going to do very well. You got to remember that although Nate Diaz may be, you know, he may be a very good striker, might have excellent cardio, volume striker. You can't put him to sleep. But the thing is, he hasn't fought since the second Conor fight. And that's how long of a layoff? That's a few years, right?
Yeah.
2-3 years?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
2 or 3 years almost.
So he hasn't fought in a very, very long time you're going against a guy who's been active. He's been active, and he's been going against some of the best competition for the last few years while you've been doing whatever. But
playing
I'm
touch
sure
blood at home or whatever.
Right. I'm sure he's still training, but there's definitely a difference. There's the ring rust factor that people don't like to bring up, because some guys handle it well, some guys don't. End of the day, I think grappling-wise, Diaz definitely has an advantage. He might have Pettis in trouble on the ground, but I believe Pettis can bring the same volume and the same pressure that Diaz can, and I think he might be able to utilize it a little better because of lack of ring rust.
My main prediction for this fight, and this is not a prediction of who wins, I don't think we see this fight on the ground for a single second.
I believe it's going to be a kickboxing match.
All 15 minutes.
Definitely.
I think we're in for what J.R. Jim Ross would call a slobber knocker. Yep. I think it is going to be strike, because I think that's why Diaz wanted this fight, because he knows Pettis isn't going to shoot a double. He's not going to be looking for any kind of jiu-jitsu scramble. I think we're in for a real striking fest.
What I found interesting about this fight is how it was made. The UFC did not call each fighter's manager, say, we're offering you this fight. Do you want this fight? They signed. Pettis' people reached out to Diaz and say, hey, you want this smoke? Diaz said, fuck yes, I want this smoke. They called the UFC, and the UFC said, what? And after the UFC woke up from the boner-induced coma, they signed that fight because apparently, sometimes to work with the Diaz brothers, you just got to let them pick the fight. But Pettis and Diaz want this fight. Apparently, they don't like each other.
Yeah, I've never heard of any past beef with them, but here we are.
Really, they do have a little bit of past beef.
Yeah, I think I've heard some
shit talk, nothing too crazy,
just like some whispers and stuff. But
for Nate, I'm gonna assume, and this might be a mistake, but I'm gonna assume that Nate Diaz has been just training this whole time.
Yeah,
and running marathons and doing triathlons. And fighting, Kron Gracie and, his brother and all the other guys that they train with, Jake Shields and all them. Mm-hmm. There's some killers in that camp. And if that Nate Diaz shows up and he can put pressure on Anthony the way Tony did, then he can win the fight.
Yeah.
With some crisp boxing. And obviously, you like Brock said, you can't kill a Diaz. However, if Anthony comes out, if young Tony Pettis comes out and really rips that leg kick, body kick combo, and Nate doesn't have an answer for it,
the leg kicks definitely seem to be a problem with
It's
Diaz
going to be a real long night
for
Nate.
They don't like to check kicks.
We're going to see Anthony dance around and whack Nate in the leg over and over and over again.
If we see WEC Anthony Pettis fight the fucking Nate Diaz that fought Michael Johnson.
The Nate Diaz fought Conor twice. That guy is a monster.
Yeah, true. But like the third Gray Maynard fight, that Michael Johnson fight,
but that's the
that
thing
first Conor fight.
Conor and Anthony are similar, and then that they are fast twitch, knockout type dudes.
True.
And Nate drags those guys into deep water and he drowns them. So that's why I got 209.
Yeah, I'm on the
motherfucker.
fence, man. I really have had a tough time seeing how this fight goes. If I had to follow my first instinct, obviously Anthony Pettis is one of my favorite fighters in the UFC, but having to pick with my mind, I kind of envision we see the Nate Diaz that, what Zach said, he drags people into deep water and he implements his game plan and makes it his fight, where if Pettis hits him a couple times and he realizes he's not going away, does he start to wilt a little bit mentally? And that's when we start to see Diaz put on the pressure. And that's really the big question, because what Brad said, if we see the Nate Diaz that fought Michael Johnson, if we saw the Nate Diaz that fought Conor McGregor, then he has a very good chance of winning, but we never know the Nate Diaz that's going to show up. But in a pure striking match, because that's what I see this as, is a 15-minute kickboxing match, I am going to take Nate Diaz taking a 3-round decision by overwhelming Anthony Pettis, but I would be happy with either result in this fight.
Who do you got, Brock?
I got Pettis by decision.
Yeah.
Pettis by decision?
This is a good one. So
I'm going Stockton, motherfucker.
You going Stockton?
I've been throwing gang signs and smoking since we started talking about this fight. Fucking.
So we got Romero and Paulo Costa.
The Battle of USADA.
Who's got the best body fight?
Right.
You know what? Paulo Costa's got some hype behind him and all, but he's never fought anybody that likes the Soldier of God, Romero. And I'm sorry, but I think Paulo Costa is going to run into a big, giant Cuban wall.
Yeah.
And get smoked.
Mm-hmm.
So I see him getting punched in his chin and put to sleep.
This is a huge hype train behind Paulo Costa, but the fact of the matter is, I'm not impressed by any of his wins, if I had to be completely honest. He beat Johnny Hendricks. Johnny Hendricks should have been retired probably 2 years ago.
And it was at 85.
Yep. Yeah, it's at 85. Hendricks wasn't made for 85. And, he is, let's see, 1, 2, 3. He's 4-0 in the UFC. All of them TKOs. That's impressive in of its own, but...
He beat Uriah Hall, right?
Yeah, he just beat Uriah Hall.
Look at the guys that Romero has killed, though. I mean...
Champions.
Killed Luke Rockhold.
Yeah.
Killed him and then kissed him on the mouth. Like, that is one of the most disrespectful things I've ever seen in my life.
Some people...
Killed Chris Weidman.
Killed him with a flying knee. Everybody forgets about that flying knee.
I saw that live, yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, obviously the strength of competition is way stronger for Yoel Romero because he has been in 2 title fights with
He's
Robert
a
Whittaker.
Cuban 40.
Some people think that
Guy's got voodoo on his side.
Some people think he beat Robert Whittaker the second time. I personally don't think that, but it was a close competitive fight that either guy could have won.
And Robert Whittaker's a monster, too.
Yes.
Oh, the Whittaker fights, yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think Paulo Costa is...
In for a rude awakening.
Yeah.
If we see the Yoel Romero that's motivated, because if you guys heard recently with this lawsuit with the supplement company, it's settled. I think the final settlement was like $27 million. He's not going to see that money, but he might see a few million.
Like
Right. Does he like ride off in the sunset, not caring about fighting anymore?
God, I hope so.
Yeah.
I hope Yoel Romero's able to retire, like in Miami or something like that, and live out his days on a
North
villa.
Cuba?
I mean, if I'm Yoel, I think I've seen his interview with Rogan and whatnot, and if I'm Yoel, like I want to live in America.
Yeah.
That's what I said. North Cuba, Miami.
Yeah, live in Miami.
Might as well.
Yeah, North
you know
Cuba.
what I mean?
That's what I said.
That's how I see that going down.
Brian, how do you see it going?
I see Paulo Costa in for what we refer to as the Cuban Missile Crisis. He's gonna get fucking missiles launched at him at off timings. Yoel Romero is he's like a good heater pitcher that has that fucking off speed pitch just to lull you to sleep before he drops heat right down the fucking middle of the plate. He's just ready. He's slow. He's just working you until you do something and kablow! And he just blasts you with a rocket and then you're not there anymore.
Yeah, the look on Luke Rockhold's face after that fight. Mm-hmm. Like, he was not in the octagon. He wasn't in the stadium. He wasn't
not
home.
On this planet. He was not in this solar system.
Yeah.
I think he was somewhere on the outskirts of the Andromeda Galaxy.
He was wherever Ben Askren was.
Right.
Yeah,
they were
where he
surfing the astral plane
Together.
with Joe Rogan on some DMT or something like that. It was.
Well, Rogan was working at the time, I believe. But
I'm not saying I don't see Paulo Costa as a contender at 85.
oh, for sure.
But I
He's
just
a good
feel like
fighter.
they're going from 0 to 100 real quick with this guy, and
He does not want this.
it's too big of a jump in competition. You don't go from Uriah Hall to Yoel Romero. That's just it's
The
stupid.
problem is the intermeeting people who's there.
Prop bet. Does Yoel slam Paulo on his head?
Oh, he's gonna knee him in the
You
face.
pick him up.
We've never seen him against the power wrestlers. It could happen. I honestly just
Has Paulo Costa ever experienced wrestling like Yoel Romero?
Oh, I don't know.
Like, that's... Yoel Romero's got, like, a weird Habib level type wrestling. Where he does things to people, like Daniel, too. Like Cormier.
Yoel grew up wrestling for his food.
Right. Where, I mean,
He's
they
like, nah,
all
I'm
three of those
hungry.
guys
You
do
gotta
things
lose.
that nobody else can do. So I'm curious if Paulo gets dumped on his
Brock. We
debut.
all seem to be saying that Yoel's going to send him to the Shadow Realm. How do you see it going?
All I'm saying is, if Yoel gets that extra 30 seconds on that stool at the end of the first,
It's all over.
he's going to kill somebody in the beginning of the second round.
Yeah,
And that's all I got to say about that.
I think Paulo Costa has some impressive kickboxing, but it's just not going to be enough to deal with a guy like Yoel Romero.
He moves so fast.
I think he wins this
That was
fight
between
however
the
he
second
wants.
and the third.
Does he knock him out? Does he wrestle him for 3 rounds, throw him
I
around?
think he knocks him out.
Yeah,
I think
but-
he hits him with a hammer.
All I'm saying is this is Nick Pomplin's value pick of the card because I think that this value you can get up Yoel Romero right now is very good. So that's honestly...
What's Yoel coming in at right now?
I think he's only like a slight favorite. I wouldn't assume
Yeah.
he's any more than minus 200. I think he's like minus 150.
Yeah, I take that Cuban in this fight for sure.
The Cuban Missile Crisis.
Mm-hmm.
So we did a little bit of research on this next fight. Benitez versus Youssef.
Youssef is a local.
Youssef is a local.
Yeah, African
And-
born. He trains with Lloyd Irvin. in
Yeah,
Maryland.
and I think all of us kind of like Youssef in this fight, right?
Yeah.
Definitely.
It's one of those, Benitez is an established UFC. I wouldn't say contender. Wouldn't say
He's a
that
veteran
high
at this point,
UFC
though. He's been
veteran.
in the
He
UFC for about
has
5
an established
years.
spot in the UFC. He
Was
has
in
some
the
good
Ultimate
wins.
Fighter Latin America?
Yeah, I remember watching that
Oh,
actually.
yeah.
So it's some impressive wins on his resume, but I feel like when you have a prospect like Youssef, that this is his first big test as far as UFC competition is concerned. I was very impressed by his tape And I do
What
think
we saw, yeah.
Yeah, I do think he'll take a 3-round decision over Benitez.
I like Yusuf in this fight. There's honestly, I think I don't want to speak for all of us, but I think we all kind of feel similarly that we haven't seen tons of either of these guys to know a lot about them. We all kind of liked Yusuf's tape a little more than Benitez. They both have some.
I think that
Good
Yusuf
bombs.
is gonna hit a first-round TKO.
Yeah, I think he could bomb on him.
He's got a lot of pop in his punches, and Benitez looks like he dips his head a little bit.
Yeah, he's been caught a few times. Like Andre Feely hit him with a head kick when he was dipping.
Oh,
Right.
I remember
And
that.
you know, a guy with what looks like Yusuf's power, that's how you get put to sleep.
I definitely agree with your first round theory. I think they're going to come out swinging, and I believe that Yusuf, I believe he hits relatively harder than Benitez. They both hit very hard, but I think he just hits a little bit harder, and it comes down to whose chin's going to hold up better. But I think they're going to scrap in the first round, and I'm excited for it.
Last but not least, Derek Brunson, Ian Hench. Brunson won his last fight, but it didn't look that good.
Yeah, honestly, I've seen many times with very good high caliber fighters when they're coming off a big loss where they don't look like themselves against a guy that's probably not in their level of competition. They kind of fight to their level because, I don't know, maybe they're scared they're going to lose their spot in the UFC, so they have to like fight a very cautious fight. I saw this with Kevin Lee a few years ago because Kevin Lee's always been a contender at 55. He lost to Leonardo Santos. It was a big upset knockout. And his next fight, he goes against Efrain Escudero, who isn't in the UFC anymore, but he barely won a decision against him. I've always wondered, like, the psychology involved in MMA. Like, when a guy loses, different guys obviously handle it differently. Some guys get way better from it, and they show it in their next fight.
Sure.
But it has to wear on you a little bit where you kind of have some self-doubt until you get in there and pick up a win. You know, wins are obviously big momentum. So what do we see out of Derek Brunson? Do we see the same guy that just fought Elias Theodorou? It didn't look impressive at all. And a very uneventful fight the only reason he won was a pair of double-leg takedowns that won it for him. This guy he's fighting is on a very impressive win streak of his own. He actually just beat Antonio Carlos Jr., Shoeface, mostly with jiu-jitsu. That was the impressive thing. It was that he really did make a jiu-jitsu fight out of that fight with Carlos Jr. and came out the better man. I didn't know this. He was actually on Dana White's Tuesday Night Contender Series. We know how it goes with some of these guys. They, obviously they can take off immediately, or they face that big competition way too early. We see that
I mean, people don't realize the jump in competition when you get into the UFC.
Yeah.
I mean, those guys really are the best of the best. I mean, you have some really good guys in Bellator and in some other promotions who could be in the UFC, but there's not very many people out there that could be UFC champion.
Yeah.
That are not in the UFC. Even Rory McDonald, who is the big guy in Bellator right now, couldn't get to the UFC championship belt. Couldn't win it.
Very close a couple times.
Really, really close, but could not get there. So yeah, I see Ian taking this fight.
Yeah.
I think Brunson's on his way out.
I like Ian. I like the two wins off of Ferreira and Shoeface. Two strong Brazilian contenders. Brunson, if he comes back to Brunson when he was surging, maybe, but...
Yeah, the Derek Brunson that was on a tear before he faced Robert Whittaker, I mean, I thought maybe he'd be getting a title shot very soon.
Brunson, his Silva fight, I felt like he probably pulled it out. But
yeah, he should have.
He didn't get that.
But, he's faced the cream of the crop, and he's come up short. He got knocked out by Jacare, knocked out by Adesanya, which that's no shame in that.
Yeah,
Lost to Robert Whittaker, that's no shame in that as well. But, I feel like is he going to stay at the bottom of the top, or is this what Zach is saying, where he's going to start falling off? Because it happens to everybody eventually.
We're going to talk about this guy later, but he's somewhere near an Asuncao, where if you can beat him, then you're ready for the elite competition in the division. So maybe he's not fallen off completely yet, and he could work himself back to the elite level, but he's like that tier down. He's that tier break.
Mm-hmm.
If you can beat him, then you're probably
The
ready
gatekeeper.
for the next. You could call it a gatekeeper like that. Gatekeeper kind of has a negative connotation usually, but that's why I say it's like a tier break. You've got your elite guys up there, and if you can beat Brunson, you're probably ready for that next tier of guys. And I think Ian Heinz is probably going to be able to just... I see it maybe probably a decision.
Yeah. He doesn't seem like much of a knockout guy.
I think he's going to win decision also.
I've seen a handful of knockouts on his resume.
But yeah, I think Brunson is that tier break right there. And
yeah.
If you can beat him, you're ready for the next level in the middleweight division.
And if you don't beat him, then it probably means you need some more time to...
You need some more time, or you're just not going to make it.
Yeah.
Because Brunson's the real deal.
He was at one point, but is that time over?
I don't think it's... That's what... Well, maybe we'll see after this that it is.
That's the question. That's why this fight's important for both guys.
I mean, yeah. But I think Brunson is, at least at this point, he's still right up there with the best in the division. Maybe not the top of the top, but if you can beat him, then you might be ready for some better fights.
So what do you think, Brock? You think Brunson gets it done this weekend?
I believe Heinz is going to be able to get it done.
Yeah.
At least based off Brunson's last performance. I really like the guy. Just maybe he's just one of those guys that rises to the occasion with his competition. Some guys just they only perform as well as they need to, and sometimes that'll get him a loss. But we'll see how he does.
I heard they're supposed to.
Yeah, it's hard for me to pick. I'm a fan of Derek Brunson, so maybe my pick is a little biased. I do think he'll show the better side of himself and possibly pull out a close 3-round decision. I think this guy that he's fighting is for real, but I think we'll see the actual contender, Derek Brunson. One of the fights that's sticking out to us the most on the prelims, we have Corey Sandhagen versus Rafael Sunsao. Another fight where we have established contender in Rafael Sunsao at bantamweight, and Sandhagen, who is on an absolute tear and a lot of impressive wins on his resume. I think he's most recently just beat John Lineker. So, Brad, what do you think? You think we see a change in the guard? Do we see a Sunsao fall off, or what happens here?
This one is, again, it's just what I was just talking about. A Sunsao, he might be even closer to the top level in the bantamweight division. He's been right there for a title shot, and he's still right outside of those guys that might get a title shot. And if Sandhagen, he just beat Lineker, right? You said?
Yes.
And Lineker might be another guy. If you can beat him, he might be a little bit washed at this point, but I don't like to say that, so maybe I shouldn't have. But I don't know that I can pick. I guess I'm leaning towards Sandhagen coming up, the surging younger fighter.
Yeah, momentum is a big factor.
That's what I'm going with. I think Sandhagen's going to take this fight.
Yeah.
I think Sunsao, he can't win the belt, so he's just trying to stay relevant, and that wears on a guy.
It's interesting. One of Sandhagen's first UFC fight, it was actually his second UFC fight. He fought Yuri Alcantara. Early in the fight, Alcantara caught him in a triangle armbar, and apparently Sandhagen's one of those guys who just can't break his arm, because he had it, like you see how it's bent right now, it was bent that way backwards. And he was just sitting there chilling, nothing was happening, and Alcantara is pulling on it probably for like a good 30 seconds. And if it was like a jiu-jitsu match, they would have stopped it because of the hyperextension.
Well, no, that's only at white belt.
Yeah.
And maybe blue belt.
Right.
For example, Hoyler Gracie is known for you can't tap him with joint locks.
Yeah.
You can only tap him with a choke.
Hodger broke Jacare's arm. Jacare shucked that shit into his fucking belt and won the fight anyway.
Right.
Yeah.
So, yeah, he got out of that after Alcantara tried to, switch to a triangle or something. I can only imagine, what do I have to do to beat this guy? But
you got to choke him to sleep.
Sandhagen came back and got a TKO win. But, wins like that and wins like Lineker, I definitely think it's very impressive. It's a big if he can jump up in competition and beat a guy like a Sunsao. I feel like with a Sunsao, he's very good at making a fight his own, controlling the pace, slowing it down if he needs to. You know, he has wins over Dillashaw. He has wins over Moraes, even though I think both of the decisions were kind of iffy. But if I had to make an ultimate prediction, I do think Assunção is going to pull out a 3-round decision.
Yeah. We've also got the return of Clay Collard to the UFC. I guess he's a late replacement for John McDessie. Devontae Smith has got knockouts, a couple of knockouts. You think he's going to keep knocking people out, and Clay Collard, or can he have a successful return to the UFC here?
It's hard to go away and come back. I think he might be food.
Yeah.
Late replacement.
I don't like it.
I don't
It's
like
a recipe for disaster.
Exactly. I think he gets cracked. I think he
feel
gets
like-
cracked by Devontae Smith.
I
And put
think
away.
Collard was a featherweight also, so he's coming in at lightweight here.
Right.
I don't necessarily like it.
No. I think he's in for
Are we all
a rude awakening.
Are we
Yeah,
all
I'm
feeling that?
looking at his resume outside of the UFC. He's gone 3-1 since he was released from the UFC, and Steel Fist Fight Night was the promotion that he had most of his fights. Yeah, I feel like this looks like a recipe for disaster. I think they're feeding this kid to...
Hey, people have come in and done great things.
Yeah,
Charlie
absolutely.
Brenneman,
Yeah.
remember he came in.
Mhm.
But I feel like we're all in agreement here that Devontae Smith's probably just going to bomb on Clay Collard.
Mhm.
Brock?
I would agree. Yeah, I mean, solid points. I don't really have anything to add for that one.
Yeah.
I would agree.
Just the last 2 fights, and then we're going to... Got Drakkar Close and Christos... Oh, I had his name earlier. Christos Giagos. Christoph Giagos or something like that. I like Close in this one.
Yeah.
Close is, again, the surging younger guy. Close has looked good. I think he might be able to work his way to a decision in that one.
Is he out of what's his face's camp? Is he one of those Dagestani guys?
Close or Giagos?
Close.
Close actually trains with Benson Henderson at the lab.
Okay. At the lab. Okay.
Yeah. Very impressive resume, honestly. He's only had 1 loss. It was to David Tamor, who's a really good striker in his own right.
Beat Bobby Green and Lando Venata.
Yeah, beat Mark Jacasey before that. He kind of shut down the hype train in Mark Jacasey.
Definitely.
I remember that, yeah.
Close is one of those guys. He's actually really fucking cocky. I picked that up from his fights. I feel like it might be an interesting personality that catches on as a heel in the UFC, as they always seem to do these days. Giagos, I'm trying to see the fight he's coming off of.
Look at the TV behind you.
Yeah, so he has a submission loss to Charles Oliveira, and he's on 2-fight win streak since then.
Oliveira got some nasty jiu-jitsu though.
Yeah.
He's got
know,
some nasty
It's not
jiu-jitsu.
shameful to get caught by that guy.
Absolutely.
It
Yeah.
happens. It's happened to a lot of good guys
Yeah,
out
that's
there.
nothing to hang your head on.
In this one, I just feel like Close is probably going to be able to work his
Remember
way
that
to
crazy
a
knee
3-round
bar
decision.
calf slicer he got? What's his face in?
Yeah, and then somebody else did it later that night.
Nasty.
Was it Aljo?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was Aljo.
Yeah.
Yep, caught him in that calf slicer.
Aljo said, okay, hold on, that's cool.
His knee was going to explode.
Yeah,
Well, it was like a banana split knee bar type
Yeah.
deal.
he's hit a lot of quirky submissions. Obviously, he's a tall and lanky guy. There was one he got against Hatsu Hioki where he locked up the anaconda grip, right? But he dropped to a guillotine, and he got his long ass leg over the opposite shoulder, and had him. It's basically like a
Just
mix.
balled up.
Yeah, mix of an anaconda and a guillotine. It was so powerful, but only a tall guy can really pull off a move like that. But yeah, I think that was the only submission loss that Hioki ever had. But yeah, no shame in getting submitted by Charles Oliveira. But I do think Drakkar Close takes this fight.
Yeah, and then the first fight here on this, it'll probably be a pretty action-packed preliminary card here. A lot of good fights, if not so many.
A lot of prospects. Yeah.
If not so many big names. Manny Bermudez is undefeated, and Casey Kenny's coming at 12-1-1.
Yeah,
I
so what I know about Casey Kenny, he just had a decision win over Ray Borg that I really didn't agree with. I think it was a really bad decision. I'm not saying it was one of the worst I've seen, but I thought it was pretty clear that Ray Borg won the fight.
I remember that.
Manny Bermudez, his nickname is Bermudez Triangle, and I can understand that because I think out of like his 14 wins in MMA, 12 of them were by submission. He's on a 5 submission streak right now.
He's got 11 by submission.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, so with that, I do think it's going to be another submission on his record, and it'd be interesting to see how he handles the step up in competition if he gets past this guy, especially if he submits him, because I think that sets him up for a borderline contender fight to crack the top 15.
Yeah. I like Manny Bermudez probably by submission after seeing what we see there. I don't know if you guys want to go so far as to say by submission, but what do you think? Just real quick.
I mean, Casey Kenny comes forward from what I've seen, and I've only seen one other fight of him. And he could definitely end up in a guillotine.
Yeah.
We'll see a big-time grappling match, I think.
Yeah. I think we're in for a pretty decent preliminary card there. Yeah, wrapping up. Anybody have anything else they want to say about the main card? Any picks they like specifically? Anything like that?
Well, I definitely gave my value pick as far as Yoel Romero. I think that's the smartest betting pick to make. As far as betting on this card, I feel like it's an entertaining card to watch, and it's not one of those that has a lot of lopsided fights, and I think that's what makes it a great card. I think we're in for a treat from the preliminaries all the way up to the main card.
What's the line on Smith Collard?
Smith Collard, let me see.
Do you have it over there?
Yeah, I got it right here.
And I'm also interested in actually these top 3 preliminary fights here.
Yeah. Out of all the fights so far, what fight are we looking forward to the most, personally?
Honestly, I'm really excited to see if Stipe was able to tweak his game enough to beat DC and kind of break that puzzle, be the first heavyweight to really out-grapple him and maybe even outstrike him. I'm very interested to see how he comes into that fight.
Yeah.
Me personally, I'm looking forward to Yoel coming in there against Paulo Costa. Paulo Costa kind of rubs me the wrong way.
Casey Kennedy and Manny Bermudez is a pick'em.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So
I might have a little fun. I always change my mind when it comes
take Manny on that one.
Take Manny on that one.
When it comes to the heat of moment of fights, when it's like 5 minutes before a fight happens.
Do they have any lines on them? Do they have any lines on the rest of the...
Yeah, I mean, we got odds on everybody.
Who do we got? What about Asuncao and Sandhagen and...
Asuncao is come in as a 129 underdog.
Okay,
And
so Sandhagen's in on the favorite there.
Yep, minus 162.
Might be worth a little play on Sunsao.
If you think Asuncao can get the work done, I like Sandhagen in the fight.
Yeah.
What about Smith and Collard? Do they have that? Because it's a late replacement fight, I believe. So
Yeah, I
it
don't
may
think they
not
have
be
that.
Might
there.
not have it in yet. That might
probably why.
that might kind of be like a few days beforehand type deal.
Or they might not take any bets on that because it's a late replacement.
They'll definitely have bets. It's just a matter of when they're going to post the line.
Yeah.
What I'm seeing right now, I'm seeing Devontae Smith coming in as a minus 600 favorite.
Okay.
So I think the odds makers think the same thing.
Yeah, that might
Brett.
be hands off on that one there.
Yeah.
But again, big favorites mean pick another couple fights and you might be able to throw a parlay together.
Maybe.
Maybe if you like Manny Bermudez, Devontae Smith, and you have something in the main card you feel strong about.
You really aren't going to be able to get any value by putting Devontae Smith in anything. Like I said, he's minus 600, so he's going to...
That's why you take your pick'ems and then maybe
Yeah,
your
but it's really
underdog
hard to
over
win 3
here.
fights also.
That's why we're trying to pick good ones.
Zach, what fight are you looking forward to the most as far as entertainment?
DC,
Yeah.
Stipe. I mean, that's the one. I mean, it's the heavyweight championship, and,
Baddest
you
man
know,
on the planet.
I'm not saying Stipe got robbed or anything like that, but we didn't get everything we wanted to see out of that first one.
Yeah.
So I think that he can definitely put on a better performance.
It's just
than
one
that
of
first
it's one of
time
those
around.
treats, man, where we're gonna be watching Yoel Romero versus Paulo Costa, knowing that we still have 2 more great fights ahead of us, and we're
Yeah.
watching Diaz and Pettis, and knowing we got a rematch for the heavyweight title.
Yeah.
it's a great card, man. They did a
is.
good job, all the way from the preliminaries to the main card.
All right, so that is the Mat Time podcast for UFC 241. Until next time, we will see you guys on the mats.